Hello, everybody, and welcome to What's the Story podcast, WTS 291. My name is Danny Murray.
And I am Graham Merigano.
Indeed, you are, Merigano. How are you, my friend?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, doing great, man. Doing great. We said it last week, but it still reigns true. God bless these bright nights. The mood lifting energy that I'm getting from just the many hours a day like we have. I was never one of those people that understood the whole seasonal happiness / sadness thing, but Jesus, me mood is through the roof.
Stop, man. As I got older, I had that terrible. I remember about 4 years ago, dreading the winter.
Yeah.
Just I literally, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was nearly counting down the days to daylight saving,
Oh man, it's unreal. I don't know what it is. Just these last couple of weeks, I've really noticed it. Where I'm in the evening or whatever, and I'm finishing up, and I'm sitting there, and there's still plenty of daylight out there. I'm still gonna get the dogs out. I'll get loads done. I can pot it. It's gonna be great. I'm loving it. No, brilliant. So I'm loving life. Mero, we've a brilliant guest this week. He's been on the podcast lots of times. He's our favourite historian, the social historian, Donal Fallon, and we'll get to Donal in a couple of minutes. What's going on in your world, man?
Rovers are top of the league.
They are, yeah. And besides that,
what's going on? What else is going on in my world? Nothing much.
Aye. That's the only reference you'll get to Rovers on top of the league now for the rest of the season. I hope you understand that. I'll let everything else out.
Yeah, cool. What about yourself?
Yeah, no, good, man. Good. Just to be honest with you, I've no preamble planned.
All right, I thought you were catching me out here or something.
No, I didn't think of that for preambles. I said I'm just going to ask Graham how he is, and we'll go from there. But yeah.
No, I feel like I've a busy kind of June coming up or whatever with concerts, and I'm going to see the Arctic Monkeys in Marley. I feel like there's family events and stuff coming up, and
June generally is a busy month, I find, because it's I'm saying I tell you what I am looking forward to though. I've two big dinners coming up, Graham. I'm looking forward to. We love talking about kind of food occasions on this, right?
Yes.
I am going to the Michelin star Campania in Kilkenny.
Very good. Is it you and the lovely Oksana?
It is me and the lovely Oksana. It is indeed. And you and I are both fans of this place, but 6 by Nico, the chipper menu.
Did you book it?
I booked it.
When are you going?
The bank holiday Monday of June.
Unreal. So since January, me and my friend, one of my best friends, Donna, we said that we were going to treat ourselves once a month at something just like a big restaurant or whatever. So we went to 6 by Nico three times maybe.
Yeah.
No, sorry, we went to the Thai restaurant. We went to Vida in Cabinteely.
Oh, but it's one of the things I miss most about the borough. Christian and the team I call it Veda. I'm not sure if it's Veda or Veda.
Veda, you're right. Veda.
Christian and the team in there. The food is just I'm doing a chef kiss emoji.
It's sensational. But we also went to their establishment, a Thai restaurant across the road in Cabinteely Village.
I haven't had it yet. Is it good?
Yeah, it's phenomenal. It's really good. The curry now tastes exactly like you were in India. Or sorry, Thailand.
Well, if you're in Thailand, you're getting Indian.
Wrong restaurant. But
which curry did you go for? Which Indian curry did you go for?
Thai red.
Oh man.
Thai red. Then we went to 6 by Nico twice. We had the imagination menu, and what was the other one we had, Dan?
Tokyo. You went to Tokyo.
Oh, the Tokyo menu was out of this world. We went to Big Mike's as well in Blackrock, and we had steak and a kind of fish platter. And now we're booked into the Michelin star Grover's Alley.
Grover's Alley. I'm dying to get in there. Paul Howard has been banging on about this for months, and I'm dying to get in there.
We're going there on the 27th of May, and my next door neighbour is a chef in that kitchen as well.
Oh, very good. Up the
borough, Connor. And we're booked in for 6 by Nico's. What's the next one after the chipper?
Up in the clouds, I think, is it?
Up in the clouds. We're booked in for that, the start of
Yeah.
July. So we're missing something in June. So, but yeah, sorry. The point was we are spoiling ourselves once a month, and we're going to
Do
do
it.
it for the year.
I
Do
encourage
you know what's
everyone
mad
to
with
do it.
Six by Nico, Danny? Like
Mm.
I would share the photos in my extended family WhatsApp group, and they'd think that my dad and my uncle would be like, that wouldn't fill you, that wouldn't fill you. I am bloated by the end of Six by Nico.
I can tell, I am. I'm stuffed. I'm fucked.
Yeah,
It's
I'm
great.
stuffed. Some of the desserts in Six by Nico have been the best desserts I've ever tasted
Oh
in
my
my life.
word, stop. Yeah. We went to the New York menu with the lovely Mark and Karen Brock. And then we done the Tokyo menu, and now we'll be doing the Chipper menu as well. The Marrakesh menu looked lovely, but I just can't make it work to get to it before it ends. But
Yeah,
lads, I'm telling this right. So I do us a favor, lads. If there's somewhere you love going for food, just hit us up and let us know at
yeah.
WTS Pod on Twitter or at Danjo Murray on Instagram, at
You're
Merrigan
not
on
pub grub
Instagram.
because we're beyond pub grub at
We
this stage.
yeah, like what
I'm
Mary was
only
saying
joking.
there. No, but like what you said is right though. Just it's that kind of thing of like once a month or once every so often. Just you know what, we're gonna go somewhere for the treat. That kind of thing. Like let us know where you go, where it's like a little bit of an occasion. Or you're just gonna treat yourself. Give us the best places to go eat some grub, lads, because that's what I'm doing these days to treat yourself. So
Perfect.
I want recommendations.
We do. So now our favorite social historian is back. And as we've always said, if we could have this fella on once a month, we could, but he's so busy writing books, doing walking tours, hosting Mick Lynch. Our favorite St. Patrick's Athletic fan, Donal Fallon. Thanks again for joining us on what seems like 4 or 5 times a year. I hope you don't mind.
No, it's great to be back. A cultural St. Patrick's Athletic fan. I have to go back to the games. I tried to go recently and was told you can't just show up in the night and buy a ticket anymore. So the League of Ireland seems to be having a moment of hipster fashion
Yeah,
beyond Fibsborough. Beyond
it's gone,
Fibsborough.
it's gone too
Yeah.
popular for you now, Donal.
Well, isn't it great to see? There's a
You have to
Pats have
stick to Hill
the
16
Pats
this
have
year.
the alliance with Rascals Brewery and their nice own brand coffee. And yeah, we might call it my good friend won't mind the Lambertification of the League of Ireland. Is there a Shamrock Rovers craft beer yet, or is it on the way?
I think there is one. I think the pub near your old apartment.
Yes. Oh, there is a Shamrock Rovers craft beer. The Four
Yeah,
Provinces.
yeah, the four provinces I think did one.
And it's love. I've actually had it, and it's named after that great piece of Shamrock Rovers history, the White Horse that they would
That's right.
march with from Rings End
Yeah,
to the cup finals.
yeah, yeah.
What a brilliant little nod. Yeah, that
That's a
pub
great
is
story, isn't it?
yeah, it's great. And as Kimmage has become slowly gentrified, this little bastion of Shamrock Rovers fans and the Four
Yeah.
Provinces is brilliant.
Like
Holding out.
when Rovers got to the final in 2019 and they walked with the horse from Rings End, the White Horse. The way like they wouldn't have done that since I can't remember, maybe the 30s or 40s, maybe.
Yeah.
Like, don't quote me on that. But how as a historian, do you like those reenactments?
Yeah, they're little like commemorative rituals. Like for example, when Tipperary are in the All Ireland final, they always go to Talbot Street, where Sean Tracy was killed in a shootout. Famous kind of Tipperary War of Independence guy. He's one of the people who began the War of Independence at Solihull Beg and Tip, and then he dies in a shootout during the War of Independence on the streets of Dublin. And there's a plaque at the site where he was killed, and they go there on the morning of the All Ireland final that they're in. And they sing this ballad, the song of Sean Tracy, and then they all make their way up to Croker together.
Wow, that is good, isn't it?
Isn't it? And then they tend to always go to the Palace after, which is a big Tipperary pub. So they're like rituals. They're things that people's fathers did before them and grandfathers did before them. I think they're really nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's cool, isn't it? The those pictures with the white horse in Rings End that year. Yeah, it's nice to see some revive brought back.
Yeah, that's I remember when they were it was the Pride of Rings End supporters club in Rings End, and I'm pretty sure their logo has the white horse in it. But yeah, all those things are great. Come here, met you before Christmas. Your book was coming out. I was in Dubray Books trying to sabotage the top 5. You were top 2. I spent the morning Christmas Eve, as I do every year, going into Grafton Street, and I went to the Dubray Books 2 or 3 times, because I met you then in Grafton Street to sign my books, which thank you so much, very generous of you. The success of that book was outstanding. I mean, you were number 2 Christmas.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it was amazing, and I think Bono bet me, but that's okay.
No, no, betcha,
I
exactly.
later got a payday off Bono, which we'll get into later on, so I don't mind.
I called them a pox in Dubray books, and they just laughed.
Well, you know, I think on some level, the thing had registered with people during the lockdown when they couldn't really do anything. And they would go on walks down the streets of their 2 km or 5 km and listen to this podcast. So I think the right thing to do was to write a book about streets and walking down streets, because that tied into that kind of lockdown appeal of pod. But yeah, it was mad because afterwards people were telling me like, "Oh, I'm walking around Watling Street, I'm walking around James Joyce Street reading the book." And I was like, God, I hope no one gets mugged out reading the book. I hope I don't send anyone down a dark, dingy laneway with this book in hand. But yeah, I think the thing that was in last year was place. So you had like, Manacon McGann, amazing guy. He
Yeah.
had that book. He wrote two beautiful books, but Listen to the Land Speak, which was all about like the Irish landscape and the mountains and all of that and language. And you had there was another beautiful book, An Irish Atlantic Rainforest, that came out too, about a guy who's moved from Dublin into rural Ireland, and he's trying to bring back old traditions and stuff. So people were really into place, being out and about, nature, rural Ireland, even urban streets. And it was a moment. It was a moment for books like that last year. It was great.
It's brilliant though, and like it's if anyone hasn't picked up a copy yet, do. It's a brilliant read. Three Castles Born and A History of Dublin in 12 Streets. But even just like from the get go, like it was funny because the first chapter was Henrietta Place, I think, isn't it?
It's Henrietta Street.
Henrietta Street. Sorry, yeah.
Great street, really cool street.
The history of the tenements alone, just that little, because like all I remember from school and tenements is Sean O'Casey and that kind of thing. So then reading this, and I'm kind of like, I've driven by and walked by those places hundreds, if not thousands of times.
Yeah.
And the stuff doesn't, but then when you read this, suddenly you're going, next time I'm walking by, it resonates a little bit more. It just, it brings it to life.
And I remember one of the first things I wrote in the Henrietta Street chapter was that people know that street whether they realize it or not, because it's always used in things.
Yeah.
But they always use it as London, because it's like two perfect terraces of Georgian houses staring at each other. And then there's a cul-de-sac at the end where the King's Inns is. So it's perfect. And there's always filming on that street pretending to be London. So it's in lots and lots of things. But when they film in Dublin for like Penny Dreadful, or what's the other big one that was done here? But they're always looking for a London that doesn't exist anymore, And the closest thing they can find to it is Henrietta Street. And sometimes you'd see like a red post box on the street, a prop, or a fake street sign, a fake London street sign. So how could this street be so famous on the big screen and the small screen as somewhere else? That was the beginning of that chapter. And what does it actually mean in the story of Dublin?
But it's brilliant, because even some like there's just so many little nods even to like things that when I was a kid, now looking back, it registers. And like, but even just stuff like the story about Moore Street and Pierce Street and all these places that we've all seen, we've all walked down, do you know what I mean? But then you forget about years, and then you read this, and it's amazing.
The people of Dublin have kind of christened the book, A History of Dublin in 12 Streets, but where the fuck is Capel Street? Because everyone's really angry at Capel Street, which is a mad street. But Capel Street is so vast that every time I tried to write about Capel Street, I just got lost. And I was like, I never felt it was covering all of it. But yeah, Capel Street's an amazing street. And the way they've pedestrianised it, but that hasn't really worked yet.
Yeah.
So it feels a bit like the Tour de France when you go down there. There's just bikes flying past. I like pedestrianisation. Pedestrianisation doesn't mean you replace cars with electric bikes.
Scooters.
It means you have to reimagine everything. You have to what kind of street furniture goes in. I was thinking about you actually, Graham, recently, because you see they're working on the square in Temple Bar now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And people are giving out saying, "Oh, it's too boring and it's too flat," but there were steps there before. So now it's more accessible. Now it's become more accessible.
Yeah, the problem is with that though, Donald. I'm two ways about that. I was quite annoyed. Like there was a who's who of kind of the social elite in Dublin and Ireland, kind of giving out 2 yards about that on Twitter, and they weren't really considering accessibility in their resentment to the actual architectural plans. So I get annoyed at that part, because I remember me and you had the discussion as well, Donald, a couple of years ago about was it beside Grogan's?
Oh yeah, Castle Market, where they
That,
removed
the
kind of
cobbles.
The cobble lock.
nice
Yeah.
tiling in the ground. But as you pointed out, like, what is nice 1980s tiling compared to accessibility?
Exactly. But so I do get annoyed at that. But then in the same breath, Dublin City Council, Dunleary Rathdown County Council, they like there's people in there that are paid to do a job, and they don't seem to comprehend that aesthetics and accessibility can go together. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which
you
is a
know,
really
like
important point.
that Temple Bar new thing, I personally think looks awful. And their excuse will be, oh, it's accessible. So you're kind of going, don't be blaming us.
Yeah, you don't want accessibility to be linked with ugliness. So like,
Exactly, exactly.
yeah,
And
bad aesthetics.
they deliberately put a model of a guy in a wheelchair in the plan as well. Like, do you know what I mean?
I was talking to a friend about Capel Street and saying, why hasn't this worked? I'm saying, like, what could you put in the middle of the road on Capel Street that would stop, uh, people treating it like a bicycle race? But I suppose the other question is then, how do you keep the road accessible? How do you keep it accessible to people in wheelchairs, people with prams? But for whatever reason, Capel Street, just my feeling is so far that it hasn't really worked. That doesn't mean it won't work.
That doesn't mean
It's a gradual process. Like when they pedestrianized Grafton Street, people were furious. There's no way this will work. So it takes a long time. There was 10 years of people moaning about Grafton Street being pedestrianized before it was accepted.
Like in Dublin, in kind of like residential kind of Dublin, like Liberties and stuff like that. As there the meeting points of old in those kind of areas for the locals, are they gone now? Like,
Good
I mean,
point. The
you go to
redevelopment is,
yeah, well, like, I mean, you go
yeah,
to Italy or you go to Germany or you go like you were recently in Berlin and you made a point of saying about art spaces, but
yeah.
did we ever have them like in the first place?
Well, I mean, one of the problems with communal space in Dublin is developers will often promise things that they don't deliver on. So the Tivoli Theatre,
Yeah.
which was
Of
leveled for
course. Don't get me started on
Space
that.
City, which is kind of it's not even a hotel; it's like an apart hotel.
Yeah.
So it's like a low frills hotel motel vibe thing. But they were talking about Tivoli Square. They said, "Oh, there's going to be a communal space within this development." But then it became a gated development quickly. People said, "Well, what happened to the promised square?" So yeah, I mean, we're very bad, I think, at enforcing things here, and public space. There has to be something given to public space in any big
Were we ever
developments.
good at it though? Like,
The Liberties has lost a lot of character, and it's I can see I'm in Black Pits now, and I can kind of see Cork Street, the cranes on the horizon, and around where Teeling's distillery is up there, Newmarket Square, and they've lost an awful lot. There's very few places you can sit down anymore
right.
Is
in the
that
Liberties and not
it,
spend money, and that's something that has to change.
is that something that it's just people chalk it down to, the evolution of a city and society, or is it just a case of people plan and they don't plan for anything other than the now? Like,
Everyone's now obsessed with like the 15-minute city. This idea that you would
yes, yeah,
have everything within 15 minutes of your doorstep. But actually, most people in Dublin don't have a playground within 15 minutes of the doorstep.
yeah,
Unbelievable. Like the very basic things that you need. And sometimes what happens in town, I notice, is space is kind of commandeered by other people. So I don't think it was a bad idea, by the way, during the lockdown when there were real restrictions on pubs, that Temple Bar Square was kind of given over to pubs and restaurants.
yeah,
So that just became outdoor seating for bars and restaurants. But they were up against like restrictions in terms of how they could operate. But then it wasn't taken back. So when pubs and restaurants reopened as normal, Temple Bar Square was still just seating for tourist pubs and restaurants. So we
yeah.
have to get better at kind of enforcing things and saying, you know what, you were given that space for a certain time for a certain reason, and now we're taking it back. And there's a new development you've probably seen it between kind of Mulligan's pub, Pubeg Street, and say Pierce Garda Station. Where the cinema used to be.
Yeah.
Screen Cinema. Mr. Screen, rest in peace. He's hiding up now in he's in the cinema on O'Connell Street. He's up there in the foyer of the Savoy. But there seems to be a walkway there between Pulbeg Street and Pierce Street. And a guy, Connor Doyle, great guy, he's campaigning to have that named after the Theatre Royal, which was at that spot. And he wants a kind of Hollywood style thing where you'd have like stars with the names of people who are in the Theatre Royal.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Very
It's a great
good.
idea. And if there's good seating there and everything else, that could really work. But yeah, I mean, developers often promise public pathways and public squares and public space and then don't deliver on it. And we just have to get better at enforcing. You said you would do this, where is it? Berlin's a great example where you've got a very strong city council. And Berlin was a dumping ground for a long time, for kind of odd people as far as the Germans were concerned. The mayor had a great line. He said in the 90s, poor but sexy. It was like, send us your odd, your arty children and they shall flourish in Berlin. But the city council was always quite left wing, I think, because of that kind of nature of the city. And public space is really good. You walk down the street and there'd be, those kind of table tennis tables, steel table tennis tables, or there'll be a place for bowls, or there'll be a playground.
We don't have any of that, do we?
You're never more than like 2 streets from a playground there. And we have a little bit of it. Sometimes you find things like in the middle of town, Ormond Square, where Johnny Giles is from.
Yeah.
It's a minute from the Liffey, literally a minute from the Liffey. And you've got a beautiful playground in the centre of that. So we do get it right sometimes, but it's just about ensuring, I suppose, that when you're building in a city, that you're also providing for people who live in it.
An attempt of a bit of a clunky segue here. One of those great public spaces that we do have is the Phoenix Park.
Oh, isn't it brilliant? Isn't it brilliant?
Speaking of success of the history of Dublin 12 streets, your next book and project centers around that magnificent public space that is the Phoenix Park.
Nice segue, and it's a strange because the last book's about 12 streets, and this book is kind of about one road, which is Chesterfield Avenue. It runs right through the Phoenix Park. It brings you from what they call City Gate, Parkgate Street, all the way to Castleknock. And that road just feels powerful, And by the way, people may have noticed this. There's no parking allowed on Chesterfield Avenue anymore. So that's changed the feeling of it totally. And you're driving up it. You've got Wellington on the left, so big, like, fuck off, Wellington testimonial. It's an amazing thing, isn't it? The largest obelisk in like the Western world, I think. You've got Ars Uachtaráin on the right. You really feel like you're in this amazing place. But you'll notice if you go into the Phoenix Park at a certain time, there's this beautiful glow that you don't get anywhere else in the city because it's not electricity. There's still gas lamps. And I discovered that one family have done that since 1890.
Amazing.
Their granddad did it. Their dad did it. They do it. One of them, Frank Flanagan, he's 92 years of age, and he's still involved in the Phoenix Park gas lamps. So,
and did you only recently find this out, Donal?
So the Irish Times had this little thing that went viral during one of the lockdowns where they went out and they followed the lads as they did the lamps. It just blew up. And the publisher saw that clip and they went, I wonder, is there more to this? Is there a big story in this? So when I sat down and spoke to them, I went out to their house. They live on Black Horse Avenue. It's kind of funny. Like, they actually live beside the park. And you can see into the park from upstairs in their house. So their whole life revolves around, like, the first thing Frank sees when he wakes up in the morning and looks out the window is the Phoenix Park. His dad, his granny worked in the park. His granny was in the park in 1882 on the day of the Phoenix Park murders.
Wow.
Or I should say the Phoenix Park assassinations.
Yeah.
2 members of the British administration were walking up Chesterfield Avenue and they were like attacked by the Fenians as they went. And there's a tiny little cross, I learned, on Chesterfield Avenue where that happened. But Frank's granny was working in the park that day and told him about the madness and the police and the horses galloping around the place. They've great stories. They've met every president since the first one, since Douglas Hyde. They're talking about Mary McAleese. She used to go around every lodging house in Phoenix Park. Every gate has a house.
Yeah.
And then there's other people who live. There's loads of people live in the park, actually. Surprising amount of people live in the park. And she would go around to all their houses and meet them all and really felt part of a community. So these lads have stories about everything from the Phoenix Park murders to the Pope's visit to hanging out with Mary McAleese. Just mad.
Brilliant.
That's mad that the lights are still gas.
Yeah, and I mean, nothing stopped the gas lights until the war in Ukraine. So gas is something, that the price of gas has gone through the roof since the invasion of Ukraine. A lot of cities very few cities actually use a lot of gas. So Berlin uses a lot of it, actually. And if you look at an aerial picture of Berlin, you can see the different lights. It's mad. Like, if you Google Berlin from space at night, you can actually see the difference between where they use gas and where they use electricity. Buckingham Palace in London, they use some of it. Prague uses a bit, but it's really uncommon. Anywhere that uses it kind of uses it as a kind of touristy thing, with the exception of Berlin and the Phoenix Park. So it's, yeah, I mean, I don't think they'll be there forever.
Yeah.
Frank would be shouting at me if he heard me say that. Like, but I think in time they'll probably give way. So what they've done in Berlin is I could see it when I was there. They've replaced gas lamps with LED lights, but they're not those really bright. You know the really bright LED, of LED lights. These that look like gas. They actually look like gas.
Yeah.
They have the same kind of
Glow.
orangey glow
or whatever. Yeah.
So they're kind of, you're able to fake a gas lamp there.
Yeah.
How many residents are there in the Phoenix Park?
Loads. I mean, there's people like former park keepers who've retired, and like a guy called John. I've got his book here. Beautiful book. He wrote a book on the history of the park. Former park chief superintendent, John McCullum, and he was the guy. He got the job in the 80s, and he really tried to fix the park because there are all kinds of problems by then. I mean, it had basically become a big road, for people who lived in the new suburbs. So you go out the Western Gate, and you've got like massive suburbia, Blanche and all that. And McCullum was like, actually, we need to think about this place. Is it a road people drive through, or is it a recreational park? And he really tried to make the park a beautiful kind of Victorian park again. He lives in it. He's retired now, and he still lives in the park. So there's loads of people knocking around in there.
And was it a case was it like Guinness, where if you work for them, you got this kind of house nearby? Was that the case?
Some people did, yeah. So like park chief and superintendent and stuff, there were like nice little perks of the job. But it's mad. Like, you're talking to someone who, when you look out your window in the morning, you might see traffic. When he looks out his window in the morning, you might see like deer, just walking across the park. And even learning about, I interviewed a guy who works in the park now, and Paul was telling me how they do a lot of work with UCD, because UCD are doing a lot of research into deer. The people who work with kind of wildlife, and they're trying to stop tourists going up there and feeding. It's really, really dangerous, by the way, to walk up to there.
This is something I've noticed a lot more, and maybe it was a lockdown thing, I don't know, but the amount of people on social media posting, going up and feed, because the deer are so used to people that they'll just come
feeding them by hand.
And
they get very freaked out by too close contact with people, and there's certain times of the year as well, where they've other things on their mind.
Yeah.
So to speak.
Like Merrill on a Saturday night. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last thing horny deer want is a Spanish language student, with a carrot in that. So
the opposite of Merrill on a Saturday night.
You have to be careful.
Right, relax.
You got to be careful around these deer. But even learning that stuff was mad, about how they deal with them, and then people's memories of the park in COVID times.
Yeah,
because it was a great cheat sheet for everyone. You weren't allowed to go more than 2 kilometers from your house. But if you lived in Chapel Lizard, or if you lived even in Stoneybatter or whatever, or when it became 5 km, Palmerstown, where my parents were, it was within your 5 km. But once you got into it, you had massive worlds.
Yeah.
So you weren't once you were in the park, no one was checking where in the park you were. So it became a big part of people's mental health and sanity during the lockdown.
Big time,
yeah, absolutely. The park, though, it's like, I mean, I think some people almost take it for granted in terms of the zoo was there, and that's kind of almost where the relationship ends. But like as you said, the history of it and the people who have, gone along Chesterfield Avenue, visited Aris and Uachtaráin, the people it is a who's who of history that has gone in and out of that park.
So who's in the park like right now as we're speaking at 8 o'clock? Who's in the park? It's bright out, so there's probably Indian and Pakistani lads playing cricket. Which is a big deal in the park. And our garrison game is soccer, their garrison game is cricket, and they're up there playing it. In a few hours the lads will be around checking the lamps. You have a lot of life in the park. You have a lot of guards. The guard headquarters is there. Orson Uachtaráin is there. The Furdy Glen, it's a place people go for sex. It's a cruising park in a big way, and it's always been like that. I mean, the lads had stories about their granddad in the early 20th century finding fellas in the park doing these things, and then discovering in the paper that these guys were done for buggery and sentenced to prison. It's always been a place where those things go on, and
even with the Garda HQ there.
Yeah, and James, one of the brothers, had a great story. He said when you'd see a couple walking up Chesterfield Avenue, he'd have the Mac under his arm to lay on the grass, and you'd watch where they went, and you'd go down after they were done, because there'd always be coins in the grass. So that's the sex tax, in the Phoenix Park, the coins that you leave in the ground. But it's mad, and actually Tiergarten Park in Berlin, right beside the Brandenburg Gate. It's the same. There's kids there and playgrounds. There's fellas in the bushes riding. There's all those things that happen in a park in any urban environment. But it's mad. I found out that Roger Casement actually went up to the Phoenix Park looking for fun.
Really?
And Take Her Up to Monto, the great song Take Her Up to Monto. Buckshot Foster, the dirty owl imposter. He took a mott and lost her in the Furry Glen. They went up to the park for the same reason. So it's a mad place. There's so much going on in the park on any given. People have been murdered in the park, not just the Phoenix Park assassinations, but
there's been wasn't there one
killings.
Wasn't one a few years ago?
Homeless man.
A terrible case of a homeless man being set on fire in a tent or something.
Yeah, people sleep in it. I mean, the lads had another story about when there's bad weather, you'd sometimes come into the park and you'd see all the tents hanging in the trees because people dry them out. Yeah. So for some people, the Phoenix Park is the pinnacle of their life. You're Orison Uachtaráin, you're the president of Ireland, and for other people, it's the lowest point of their life.
And where did it come from? Where did you read that about Roger Casement?
Oh, I was tipped off to Roger's diaries, and this is a PG show, so we're not going to read the diaries out.
Is there actually Roger's
Roger
diaries?
Casement's diaries are kind of half motivated by his desire to free Ireland, and half motivated by his desire to have sex. It's brilliant. And both of these things, took up a lot of his time and his thinking. But it was amazing to think that things like that go back that far. People, in some ways haven't changed all that much. Yeah, and even soccer, like Bohemians are born in the Phoenix Park. Dermot Looney wrote that lovely book on Pat's Saints Rising. I didn't know Pat's played their earliest seasons in the Phoenix Park. It's the birthplace of so many things in Dublin, and so many good things, a few bad things. But it's a mad place.
Are Roger Casement stories being published?
Well, they have been published a few times over the years, and there's lots of debate over, whether they were forged. They weren't forged. I think when they got to court, I think they were definitely amended in places and potentially exaggerated, but a lot of it is what it is. And that's kind of accepted now. And Casement, that was the life he lived, and it's all there on paper, But,
what did one of your heroes think of the Phoenix Park, Brendan Behan?
But, well, you see, Behan, his uncle Patrick Kearney wrote many of the great kind of nationalist songs of the day, and that event, the Phoenix Park murders, has always really divided nationalist opinion. If it should have happened or not. 1882, Cavendish and Burke. Cavendish is on the first day in the job in Dublin, and as they're walking up Chesterfield Avenue, he's with a guy called Thomas Burke. He's the permanent undersecretary, so he's like a permanent British official in Dublin, but Cavendish is brand new. Like, he doesn't know anyone. He's brand new. And as they're walking up Chesterfield Avenue, the Invincibles, as they're called, lay attack. And that's the line in the song, Monto. It wasn't very sensible to tell on the Invincibles. They stand up for their principles day and night. And it's just a mad moment. It's just a mad moment. These murders that shock the empire and nearly toppled Parnell's career. I just found it amazing to look at that, because the fact that Frank's granny was there that day, and there's a cross in the ground. The area at Chesterfield Avenue where there's a break in the trees, and you can see into Orison Uachtaráin.
Yeah.
Just across the street.
A famous picture of the president of the dogs, that one.
Yeah, just across the road on the other side. But almost in line with that break is the little cross where the Phoenix Park murders happened.
Wow.
So the fact that Frank's granny had seen that, and he had stories as a kid about, the ghost stories. He used to talk about how the kids claim that they see Burke and Cavendish walking up the road at night and stuff, which is amazing, isn't it? And if the Phoenix Park isn't haunted, nowhere in Dublin is haunted, because it's a mad place. The energy of the park at night is really strange. And then you've all these villages around it, which are so different, So Chapel Lizard is a mad, like Chapel Lizard feels like you're in rural Ireland, doesn't it? When you go to Chapel Lizard, it's like
what some of the architecture in Chapel Lizard looks like rural Ireland, or
And you've Sheridan Lafanu, the great ghostwriter. He there's a house there, the house near the churchyard, where he said one of his big ghost stories, and it's a very eerie place. Chapel Lizard, very kind of there's a lot of ghost stories around it anyway. Then you compare it where the lads are. Black Horse Avenue kind of nearly feels like you're in rural Ireland as well, up at a hole in the wall.
What do you mean about the mood or the airy in Phoenix Park? What is it?
I just like when you're walking through the park, you're like the magazine fort, that's the Easter Rising began there. That the plan was to raid the magazine fort and blow it up. And they did raid it. They did manage to blow it up. But as you're walking through the park, there's just so many things where, people's lives were transformed or people's lives were taken. And even like one thing I didn't write about in the book actually was Malcolm MacArthur, the killing of the nurse in the park. And that's where that, saying Gubu was grotesque, unprecedented, bizarre, unbelievable. It was like a murder that shocked the country. But yeah, like a lot has happened there, and a lot of people, the fact that you're in a place where people have gone in desperation, where they're like suicides in the park has been an issue too through the ages, homeless people in the park. Yeah, it's just a place which has a very strange air about it.
Well, it's mad.
Very,
When you
yeah,
say it like that, and the amount of history that's taken place in it,
a million people went there to hear the Pope, which is
mental. That's
mad.
mental.
A million people, and David McWilliams, who I know you've had in the pod, he talks about the Pope's children, the people who were there in the 70s who went on to change the course of Ireland's economic future. But it's just mad to me that people went there in a crowd of a million and felt that they're part of this great moment. Other people have gone there at the lowest point of their lives, and it's just a
Mental,
mad
isn't it?
place.
And
It's mad energy. It's massive.
110,000 people went there to watch the Red Hot Chili Peppers one year as well.
Yeah, yeah. I seen the Stone Roses there in their first
Me
comeback
too, yeah.
gig. Yeah, and Red Hot Chili Peppers and the Pixies, lest we forget.
That's
right.
very true. Yeah,
An amazing opening set. But all the big parks of London, your Regent's Park and all the other ones, the Phoenix Park is bigger than the 5 big London parks combined. Like it's massive.
Combined.
Isn't it? It's
Yeah,
incredible.
it's massive.
Wow.
Absolutely massive.
Um,
So these young fellas going up and down Chesterfield Avenue doing the gas lamps, they're kind of just the in. They're the in to the bigger story of the park.
When will the book hopefully be on shelves, Donal?
Hopefully September. And my brother Luke, he took a lot of the pictures on a film camera.
Oh, brilliant.
So film, like in the Three Castles book, film was great because it can be a bit moody and you don't know what the picture's going to come back looking like till you see it. But when he was shooting, one of the lads, James, was up doing the lamps and he was taking a picture. And James said, "Is that a film camera? You don't see many of them anymore." And Luke said, "You're fixing a fucking Victorian gas lamp." You want to talk about old technology?
Exactly.
But the pictures are great, and it's a moment in time. It's a moment in time because I tell you, 20 years there'll be LED lights in the Phoenix Park and everywhere else too.
Yeah. That's it. It's a changing world. Speaking of changing worlds, I sat down recently to watch Disney Plus and their show about Bono and the Edge and David Letterman. And I'm about 10, 15 minutes in and I go, it's Donal fucking Fallon.
Yeah.
Yeah. A big Disney TV star now. Huh?
Proof I can keep a secret. Proof I can keep a secret. A non-disclosure agreement. And, my love of getting paid beats my love of gossip. So I didn't tell anyone. I didn't tell anyone about it. And when it came out on telly, people were like, "What the fuck is that you on telly with David Letterman?" But he came over about a week and a half before Christmas. And you might remember there was a really foggy week. There was a week where conditions were pretty bad,
Yeah.
And I wasn't sure if they were going to do it, but I met them at the Project Arts Centre, and I only found out it was Letterman, I think, a day before.
Oh, wow.
And the people that they recruited to come on the tour had no clue. Like they stopped tourists at random in the street and they said, "Do you want to be in a documentary about you too?" That's all they told them. So you end up with these Spanish and German, American visitors who had no clue what they're getting into. And some of them didn't know who Letterman was because they weren't from English speaking.
Yeah.
Or English was like their second language, so they wouldn't be watching like clips of Letterman on YouTube or whatever. But because it was so close to Christmas, that meant there were very few American tourists in the city. So very few people recognized Letterman. You're walking around town with someone who was simultaneously very, very famous, but also kind of relatively able to blend in here, bar the like 12 cameras. And when you do something on RTE, like there's one camera and they do something from multiple angles, to make it appear like there's lots of cameras. But when you do something with Disney Plus, there's just cameras everywhere. I've never seen a setup like it. It's just unbelievable. So we went to the project. That's where they played some of their earliest gigs. So we're still the hype. And crucially, that's where Paul McGuinness seen the band. And Paul has a lovely line about U2. Paul, the manager, said that they were a band of 4 and a corporation of 5. So like, he knew his place in the story, but he's seen them there. Totally fell for them. And we talked about where the name U2 came from. Now that didn't make it in, which I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah,
But,
it's odd because it's kind of a big part of.
Yeah, Steve Rappert from the Radiators in Space, who are a great Dublin punk band. He was a graphic designer, and he said, "Look, the name, The Hype, it doesn't really suit. It's a bit punk. You're not a punk band. You're like a post-punk band." And at the time, you had lots of great band names. So in XS, INXS, UB40. There was a kind of trend. There was a certain kind of post-punk name, which was like letters, numbers, or just 3 or 4 letters. XTC, that was one that U2 loved. XTC. So he wanted something like that, and he settled on U2. Simple. And for a graphic designer, it's a dream. It's like you can write U2 so easily, and it looks brilliant. Any font.
Yeah.
You look at U2 album covers over the years.
Yeah.
It's so iconic. Yeah. One number, one letter, side by side, perfect. So that didn't make it in. The stuff that makes it in is funny, and the stuff that doesn't. But I suppose.
Are you a fan of U2, Donald?
I like the very early stuff.
Yeah.
I think it's like the singles like Out of Control and stuff. They really were a post-punk band.
Yeah.
And they're fast. And you can tell that a lot of the Dublin scene in the 70s, what they were listening to wasn't English stuff. They were really into American stuff. So the big influence was the Ramones.
Yes.
Actually, the very early days of U2, The Hype, their sets have like maybe 2 Ramones covers in every gig. And people were listening to like Iggy Pop and the Stooges and stuff. So the sound is different from what was happening in England, except the Clash. They love the Clash. I was chuffed that bit made it in.
Yeah.
That Bono and The Edge, they were at that gig when U2 performed in Trinity College. And that really made them think about, God, we could do that, you know. We could.
You must have been chuffed to be asked, O'Donnell, were you?
It was cool, yeah. It was great because, yeah, the 70s and the 80s, like people don't like to think of that as history because they remember it. You know? So, I noticed that there's young kids now, we all have nostalgia for Italia 90.
Yeah.
Which we were around for barely in some cases. Like I was like 1 or 9 months or something. Like Italia 90 takes this very romantic place for our generation and Little Chow and all of that. But now I see kids who were born in like 2001, 2002, and they're wearing like the World Cup 98 mascot, the little guy from France. For me, that's weird because I remember watching that World Cup as a child. And I think there's a bit of that with the 70s and the 80s. A lot of people say, oh, that's not history. I was at that gig. That's not history. Like, well, it is history, whether you like it or not. The 1970s and the 80s is part of the historic story of Dublin. Temple Bar. We were talking about Temple Bar earlier. Temple Bar emerges in this kind of countercultural thing in 1970s Dublin. So, yeah, people don't like to admit that stuff is history because it makes them feel old. But the story of U2 is now a historical story. They could only have come out of Dublin at that time. Yeah. Temple Bar at that time. Even some of the early songs that touch on things like addiction, drugs, when heroin was a big problem in the north of the city and the northern suburbs. So they're a product of Sunday Bloody Sundays. They're a better example than that of a song that captures a moment in history. So I liked the idea of taking something that everyone in Ireland knows, U2, and reminding people that yes, it's a powerhouse band today, but it's also a historic story.
Yeah.
And Bono's book was really good. People didn't want it to be good, but it was good.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think I said it on this podcast there a while back. I got a gift for a thing on Audible, and I decided I'll give the audiobook a go. And
yeah,
I couldn't believe, like, as far as audiobooks go, it's one of the best of it because the production value in it. And
the way he describes the Clash gig and stuff, it's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Where it kind of drifts a bit, where it starts to lose me at times. There's a lot of God in it, and
there is quite a bit of God in it. Yeah, but he is.
And they're kind of a Christian rock band, but they don't begin as a Christian rock band. They begin as a kind of post-punk band. But by the middle of the next decade, there's a lot of God there, and a lot of the songs, I think, between the lines are kind of about God.
Yeah, well, even in the early days when around the October album in the early 80s, when they had that kind of internal battle because I think Edge and Bono were members of this Christian, use the word cult, but
well, I didn't know that.
It nearly split the band
Very
up.
strange.
But you're right, and like the tourist industry that's being built around it, they come to see these landmarks. People do. There's a weird thing of people who flock to see stuff down around
Yeah,
Sir John Rogerson's Quay and Hanover Quay where the
funny you
studio
say that, because
Lane
that's
claimed.
that's the thing that didn't get in. Where
Yeah,
I was standing at the Project Arts Centre at the very beginning, and I said to the group, 10 or 12 times a day, tour groups stop exactly where we're standing now, and they point over there at the Clarence Hotel, and they tell the same lie. And there's this fake story that apparently U2 once entered a battle of the bands in the Clarence Hotel, and they didn't win. And there was a row with the bouncers, and the bouncer said, "You have to leave now." And as they were leaving, they shouted back, "We're going to own this place someday." And
It's Hollywood, isn't it?
that story's told all the time, and it's nonsense. The Clarence Hotel was not that kind of place at that time.
No,
It was a
no.
place where, uh, priests and nuns and the like drank cups of Irish coffee waiting for the next bus. Like, it wasn't a particularly exciting hotel bar.
yeah,
But it's a myth that's just entered the lore of the city. And I was saying, like, actually, the building behind us, this big freaky blue building, the Project Art Centre, this is actually where it all began.
yeah.
So there
They're
is a
still
huge.
on the Clarence.
I don't know. I think they're still in it in some capacity. Yeah, in
So
on it in some capacity. But
the
it's
Octagon
amazing that
Bar,
a lie
terrible
told often
publicans.
enough. And there's every city has foundation lies. So you go on a tour in New York and they talk about how there's alligators in the sewers, because there
Yeah,
isn't. People believe it.
Yeah.
And yeah, London has all these mad conspiracy theories about, World War II. There's a few of them, but they talk about these abandoned tube stations that were sealed up. There's a handful of them, but in the mind of a Londoner, there's like dozens of them. People
they're
will tell you all
everywhere.
the
Yeah.
time. So for Dublin, that U2 myth is one of the big ones.
Donald,
We're,
before we were, sorry, Dan, we are running out of time.
exactly.
I
Yeah.
just wanted to see, you hosted Mick Lynch at a festival there recently. What was Mick like? Cork
What an
City
amazing
fan by all
man. I
accounts.
mean, the thing, like everyone, I loved watching Mick during the RMT dispute in England. It was amazing watching him on Sky News, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's
Going
brilliant.
through going through Kay Burley like a knife through hot butter.
Yeah,
And
brilliant.
Kay Burley did this thing that I've never seen a newsreader do before. She would actually roll her eyes. Like, she's like, Mick
It is.
Lynch,
I love that. I love
Mick
when
Lynch on the picket line again.
I love when he's talking and he's answering questions, and he shows an air of disdain to the question,
Yeah.
but he still articulates it so well. And by all accounts, he's a Cork City fan as well. So
And he's serious about Cork, and he's his family are Cork and Armagh, but he's been a massive Republic of Ireland away fan going right back. He was in Stuttgart in '88
wow,
behind the
didn't
wall
know that.
for Ray Houghton. But we ended up in a very interesting discussion about what it means to be Irish in Britain, because he said when he goes to the Ireland away games, and he goes to loads of them. In fact, he's going to an upcoming Ireland away game with his son. He said when you go to an Ireland away game, there's fellas from Manchester, Liverpool, Glasgow, lots of Glasgow people. But when you go to an Ireland game at home in Lansdowne, you sometimes get this like you're a plastic paddy thing. And he's like, actually, his Irishness is as so important to him. It's as important to him as his kind of English identity. And it's just mad, isn't it? That like we love when there's someone on the news who's got an Irish connection.
Yeah,
If we like them. Ronald Reagan came here in the 70s. Ronald Reagan was very Irish by blood. But we were like, no, we don't like you. When Christie has that great one there. You were wearing the green down in Ballyporeen. Hey, Ronnie Reagan and black and bacon. Like when Reagan came to Ireland, people didn't want to know about him, even though he had strong Irish blood. But Mick Lynch, who has very strong Irish blood, we love him. So every radio station in the country, everyone wanted to chat to Mick Lynch about his Irishness. And I find that Irish identity in Britain, it's a very beautiful thing, in London and Manchester, Liverpool. It produced the Pogues, it produced the Beatles, it produced the Smiths. It's a real part of being Irish.
Oasis.
The Oasis, that's a great example. And when I love the clip of Oasis on the Late Late Show in the 90s, and they're like, we've just done a gig, we don't really want to be here, but our mother would kill us if we didn't come on the Late Late Show.
Yeah.
To the Irish in Britain, it meant so much. So yeah, Mick's identity was an interesting thing to talk about. But look at him giving a speech. He doesn't shout. He doesn't get into this like juvenile language that the other side are the enemy. It's very reasonable. And I think him and Eddie Dempsey and the people around them, they really represented their workers in a kind of calm, dignified way. And when they're on the picket lines, by the way, Mick and Eddie weren't paid. The RMT officials on strike days weren't paid, which I thought was a very important principled position that you know, if people are suffering to be on the picket line, the head of the union should be in the same position. They threw everything at him, the papers, everything they could throw at him. That he
But
was
he's a nice man though, is he? Yeah.
He's a lovely man, and his wife too. They're just really nice, grounded people, and there's a lesson in that, isn't there? I suppose that when you go out as they went out, the RMT, and you're willing to be in it for the long run, and you're willing to play the media game right. One thing that is, he went on podcasts like yours. He went, you know, Joe.co.uk.
Yeah.
No, Joe began as an Irish thing, didn't it? It was Joe.ie.
Yeah,
They've got an English section now. And Joe.co.uk did a thing where they went down the pub with Eddie and Nick. They drank a few pints with this young broadcaster, and they talked about the dispute. They talked about their lives. And he was able to bring it down to the level of whatever it was. If it was a show aimed at 19-year-olds, or if it was, you know, GB News, which is like this like right-wing news channel in Britain now. It's like a breakaway. It's kind of like Piers Morgan and all these kind of people.
Yeah.
They're pretty undesirable people as far as I presume Mick is concerned, but it was still a platform. It was a different audience. He had to go on there and win them as well. He went everywhere. There was no section of the media that he wasn't willing to have the battle of ideas in. And that's what it's all about. You don't just speak to the people who agree with you. You have to speak to everyone.
There's a little bit too much of that, I think, in the modern world, the modern media, where it's, I'm only going to talk to this side because they'll tell the story I want to tell. You know,
and whose fault is that? In some ways that's like tech's fault, because recently I just became kind of obsessed with Andrew Tate. I think he's hilarious. He's just a fool. He's just a total fool, you know. I was watching his videos and it's like, you know, come to Dubai and you can be me, and it's just mad shit. But once you watch one or two Andrew Tate videos, suddenly your YouTube feed is just all these
it's toxic as well, isn't
nasty kind of lifestyle misogynist types. So when you watch something once or twice, you're suddenly bombarded with that content, which is a real pity in the world we're in today. But Mick went across the trenches a few times, and even like some of the papers, like the Daily Mail, just went for them all the time.
Yeah,
but he'd still talk to them. I mean, he was able to laugh. He had a great line where he said, "Anyone from any newspapers here? And if there's not, I'll take a question from the Daily Mail." And everyone laughed, including the Daily Mail. But he'd still engaged with them, and I think that was part of his success. The algorithm stuff is fascinating, isn't it? And kind of right.
It's been fascinating to you for years, hasn't it, Donald?
I've always been conscious of it, and people that make, like you guys, anyone that makes content is always thinking about it. Who's seeing my stuff or who's not seeing my stuff, and why are they seeing it or not seeing it? But when you go down a rabbit hole like that, when you find something, I don't know why. I think I watched this guy Andrew Tate on Piers Morgan. I actually never heard of him before, and then I realized he was a fighter and he had this whole backstory. I just thought he was so comically mad and just nuts that I kind of hate. It's what's the term they use? I hate watched some of his stuff. And then I was getting loads of it.
Doomsday scrolling is what it is.
Doomsday scrolling, brilliant. So it's like, you know, when YouTube decides what you want to watch next.
Exactly. Come here, you mentioned Dave McWilliams there before, and this is definitely the end because you have to go.
I'm going for a while.
You're booked for the Docky Book Festival this summer.
Yeah, the Docky Book Festival is a mad thing, isn't it? And they asked me to do a live pod out there. So originally it was John Banville, until John Banville learned that he cannot be in two places at once. So he double booked himself. He double booked himself in opposite provinces, never mind counties. So they were like, "Who else do you want?" And I kind of said, "Oh, I don't know now." I said, "Not feeling it. Maybe we'll just come back next year and we'll do Banville." And they said, "Well, if you could have anyone, who would you have?" And I said, "Well, if you can get me Roddy Doyle, I'll do it." And they got Roddy. So Roddy's
real.
Yeah, Roddy's the man, you know.
I didn't know that because I did see the advertising for John Banville.
Yeah, and it's ended up being Roddy in the end. So I think that'll be very special. And
that's on the 16th.
That's on the 17th. The 16th is Bloomsday. The anniversary of Ulysses. So this will be the first Bloomsday where I don't get absolutely rat arse drunk because I would be a good nigga. I think it's what Joyce would want, you know.
Yeah. But is there a big anniversary this year? Is it for Bloomsday?
No, we had it there. It was 2022. Last year was the 100th anniversary.
So geez, that was the anniversary, and then Behan was 100, like 100.
Yeah, Behan was February, and we're doing a thing actually in the Literature Festival next Friday. So yeah, just over a week with or probably this week or whenever this goes out, 26th, with Rady from Langham and Pat McCabe wrote The Butcher Boy and a few other people.
Brilliant.
So the Behan anniversary has been interesting because he's remembered as a series of like very funny one-liners. I'm a drinker with a writing problem. Fantastic lines. But actually, when you scratch below the surface, there's this amazing writer in 2 languages. Fantastic Irish writer, fantastic English writer, who writes brilliant stuff. Probably the best prison memoir of like the mid 20th century. Borstal Boy is amazing. Such a fantastic book. The Quare Fellow, great play. The family produces all this amazing stuff. I mean, the same family produced the national anthem. Aaron Levine, his uncle, and his brother writes Liverpool Lou, which is John Lennon's favorite song, and Come Out Your Blackened Hands, which you may remember went to #1 in the iTunes chart in 2020, a few weeks before we were all locked down. Remember? Do you remember that? Right before lockdown, there was the Black and Tan Gate.
Yeah, that was the
state commemorating the RIC.
Yeah.
Everyone was up in arms about it. It was mayhem. And Dominic Behan's song, Come Out You Black and Tan. I think it was the Wolf Tones version. It went to #1 on iTunes in Ireland and in Britain. So this is the one family. The family of Aaron Levine also produce Come Out You Black and Tans.
Mental, isn't it?
What a mad family from the north.
I saw with the recent with the recent kind of migrant crisis that we're dealing with and the growing unease from people that are calling a small minority. I did see tweets about there was, I suppose, I'm not sure if there were tweets from historians, but it was there were definitely from Behan fans saying, it was basically saying this is how Behan would have handled those protests.
Oh, back in the 30s, he had an altercation with blue shirts on the streets. But that was, the stuff with the blue shirts was interesting because the blue shirts were kind of quasi-fascist. The leaders definitely knew what they were doing. And even they instead of the Sieg Heil and the straight arm salute, they used to do Hocko Duffy. And they'd put their hand up. And even wearing a shirt, like the brown shirts and the black shirts, like the people who were directing the blue shirts knew what they were doing. They were trying to create an Irish fascist movement. The rank and file, I don't think were fascist at all. I think they were just like, conservative farmers who were concerned that Dev was going to collectivize all their farms or something. But the IRA detested the blue shirts. Yeah. And I think one reason for it was they were basically the pro-treaty side. People like O'Duffy and stuff. They were like the other side of the Civil War. I think that was a big motivating factor for a lot of people. But then Behan, he was raised, his house in Crumlin was known as the Crumlin Kremlin. His mother used to play a record of the Russian national anthem, and she'd open the windows and sing it at the top of her voice. What? So he actually grew up in a very left-wing anti-fascist household. And the idea of this young kid from Russell Street / Crumlin attacking the blue shirts on the streets, it's very believable. I certainly believe it happened.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. He tried to go to Spain. He could have ended up a verse in Christie's song.
Yeah,
Viva la Quinta Vergara.
He turned him down. He was too. Yeah, Frank Ryan. When he showed up and met Frank Ryan, apparently he was with his friend Cathal Goulding, and Frank said, "You're too young. Please, you're too young." And he'd been out in Spain. Frank, he got injured and he came back. And fair play to him actually got back out there because he knew they weren't going to win.
Yeah.
And he'd seen people wiped out. Frank still went back and was eventually captured. But he told Brendan and Cathal that they were too young. And there's a story, I don't know if it's true or not, but there's a story that apparently they wanted to cycle to Belfast because they heard there was a boat going out to Spain from Belfast. And they got a puncture on the way. Cathal said that he got a puncture at Balbriggan or something. And they turned and went home. So, yeah, Brendan could have been like Charlie Donnelly, or Tommy Wood. Could have been a sad name in that song.
Cycling to Belfast, unbelievable commitment there.
To go and fight in Spain.
It's mental.
But he had a lovely line, Brendan, about the blue shirts. He said they were the only army in human history who ever came back with more men than they left it. They didn't see a whole lot of action. But the Irish guys, when you listen to that Christie song, they were wiped out.
Yeah.
They were hammered. Some of the worst battles in the war, like Ebro and Jarama, they were just the fatality rates. It was a very dangerous place to be, Spain.
Yeah, there's that brilliant line, even the olives were bleeding.
Charlie Donnelly wrote that one, poet. And I really feel for him. He was a young poet from Tyrone. He'd gone to UCD, he didn't graduate, but he was getting very frustrated by the atmosphere in Dublin. And apparently he left Dublin, went to his friend in London, Leslie Dakin knocked on his door one morning, and Leslie said he arrived straight from the Euston train and before the milk. He was at the door, and when he said, "Why are you here?" Charlie said, "I just can't take that place anymore. That Dublin was heating up so much, and the blue shirts were on the rise that he just had to leave." And it's such a romantic war, isn't it? Like, Hemingway fights in it, and it's just like it produced Orwell fights in it. Like, it's a moment in time. It's a war that every romantic, idealistic young man and some women were drawn towards. I'm glad Brendan wasn't at the Battle of Arama.
Yeah.
Donal, as all, we could spend hours and hours and hours talking to you, but that wouldn't be fair to you. But then if people like us are raging that this episode is coming to an end, they'll be delighted to know that there's many hours of you telling even better stories, if possible.
Well, as we finish this call, I'm editing the next one, which is about Paddy Carney.
There you go. Look at that.
I learned some mad stuff. He wrote the national anthem in a cafe, the Swiss Cafe on O'Connell Street, which is mad. Yeah, he wrote the national anthem in a cafe, which is crazy, isn't it? On O'Connell Street, which is so beautifully symbolic, where the GPO is. So that's going up. I hope that goes up tomorrow, all going well. But it's been great fun. Like, you lads are at it a long time. You're the original connoisseurs of Irish podcasting. You're right up there.
We're 8 years old next month, Donal.
It must have been just like the Irish History Podcast. Was Blind Boy on the go?
No,
I think he came about a year or two
later.
Yeah.
He must be like in the first 10 or 15 Irish podcasts.
I think Jarlath was definitely going.
Yeah.
And then the Irish History Podcast was there, and I can't even remember. There was definitely one or two others, all right, but then it was like sort of late 2016, 2017. There was like the pod blast, if you will, this bomb, where suddenly, and then over the years, it's brilliant. The amount of Irish content that is out there now, and brilliant Irish content at that. So
we need them. We need them to divide the charts in two, right? There needs to be one chart for any podcast that has Vogue Williams in it. Which seems to be about 7 in the top 50. I went through it one day, and it was like Vogue on her own, Vogue and her friend, Vogue and her fella, Vogue and her fella in another capacity.
Yeah, Vogue and Joanne, Vogue
hogging the charts. She's hogging the charts.
But here's the
4
thing,
or 5 sold out nights at the Tree Arena.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing, though, lads. And it's something that, and Mero, you and I are foolish for not tapping into it a lot quicker. The female audience isn't just true crime. People made this assumption that women only listen to true crime podcasts, and yet,
the obsession with crime is like so many series on murders. There won't be a mass murder left in world history by the time the podcast.
This time next year, you'll be telling us you're doing one on the Phoenix Park murders.
Yeah, well, there's been one that's really good. There was one done during lockdown. I think it's called The Invincibles. It's a good listen.
Yeah.
But yeah, you'll have people going out and committing murders so they can do podcast series.
We don't condone it.
I might see you at the Doggy Book Festival.
Yeah, brilliant. Looking forward to that. And I know you've had McWilliams on a few times. He did your like Woodstock moment, didn't he? That big one in the workman's back.
He done one of our live shows.
Yeah. It's
like
mad.
now
we all have podcasts. The 3 guests now have all podcasts.
Everyone claims they're at it. Who was it? It was PJ. It was
PJ.
Williams.
No. It was Joanne McNally,
Joanne McNally,
Williams, and
Ken Early.
Now Ken was the OG of.
Actually, there you go. There's second captains are gone.
Imagine what you could command for that lineup today.
Stop, Joanne. Bloody gazillionaire now, I'd say.
Brilliant.
That's it. And right, lads,
that's the Alamo. That's the GPO of Irish podcasting. That's where it all began.
That's what we call it now.
That's it. Donal,
thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure. All the best with the book, and continued success with Three Castles Born, and easily the best history podcast out there. But thank you so much, man. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Donal.
Brilliant. It's the only way I can describe Donal Fallon and everything he's done with Three Castles Born. A gent of a man, and his ability to tell stories and remember facts and just make those social connections between a heathen city and an individual is just fantastic.
But it's his recall as well, and it's like what Padjo always says, that his voice is so soothing and easy to listen to, that imagine he was, now my history teacher in school was the legendary PJ Carty, so
Great man.
I did learn a lot. But imagine him being a teacher for you in school, like.
Oh, man. He's I, like I studied history in college, and some of the lecturers or whatever I had were brilliant and engaging and everything. But I can't help but feel Donal could easily inspire like a new generation of avid history fans and historians.
Absolutely.
But the thing is, he's bringing it to the masses though. That's the beauty of it. Like,
yeah, and I hope he's making something from it, from the pod. But if anyone's listening, try and get down to the Dalkey Book Festival to see Donal in conversation with the great Roddy Doyle. That's
absolutely.
on Saturday, June 17th. That will be unbelievable. Now, I'm booked in to see Paul and Roddy Collins that afternoon, but I'm not sure if it doesn't clash.
That's a sin now, that is, that you've just gone first name only because you're name dropping.
Oh, did I do that?
You did. You went, I'm going to see Paul, as if everybody is on first name terms with our friend
the great Paul Howard.
Sorry. Paul and Roddy Collins will be brilliant. Me and Gary Mackle had the pleasure of going to see Paul Howard and Roddy Collins in the Sugar Club there when they were launching The Rodfather, and it was a brilliant night, a brilliant event. The stories being shared were fantastic, great crack, great sincerity in some of the stories as well. The Rodfather is an amazing book. It's even Cubes picked it up after I finished it, and she was like, there's a lot of football in it, but that's a love story, it's not a football story. And I was like, the amount of people have said that, Cubes, you've got a nail on the head.
Yeah, but I got that audiobook. Have you got the audiobook?
I didn't do the audiobook, no. Oh yeah, I did. Sorry, I did. I just haven't listened to, because I read the book and then
I tried to get the audiobook of No Surrender on Audible, and it was only given to me in French.
That's your sentence, pal.
Is it?
Yeah, you'd want to check into that.
Because of other audiobooks.
I don't know, but I can tell Audible, and it's not No Surrender, it's Surrender.
No Surrender.
No Surrender is a Bruce Springsteen song. It's a brilliant song, by the way.
Good.
And actually on his live show, a great moment on his live show is actually, we should talk to this last week when I talked about it. They play No Surrender. It's like the second or third song on the set list. Little Steven Van Zandt, playing with a guitar decked out in the Ukraine flag. Beautiful moment, just very poignant, very fitting. Anyway, sorry, that's an aside.
I have to tell you a funny anecdote there. My brother Carl didn't realize that Seal from The Sopranos was in the E Street Band.
No way.
Yeah. And he was on his Instagram, and obviously some of his friends maybe were at Bruce Springsteen. He was like, what the fuck is Seal doing on stage? Oh, brilliant. Anyway, Dan, where can anyone listen to us?
They can get us anywhere and everywhere you get a podcast. And same with Three Cockles Born podcast. But you can get it on Spotify. That's where most people are getting it these days. You can get it on Apple Podcasts. You can get it on Stitcher, Podbean, Podcast Addict, Podcast Republic. Literally anywhere and everywhere. Just search WTS Pod. And 290 episodes that precede this will be there waiting for you, along with me and Mero, and a couple of short-lived 10-minute specials called the 600. There's bonus episodes in there as well. You can get us on social media at WTS Pod on Twitter. He's at Merrigamania on the Instagram. I'm at Danjo Murray on the Instagram. It's been a pleasure, lads. Thanks for listening. And until next week,
clear eyes,
full hearts,
can't lose.
It's way.